So, my name is Blair Reich, and I've put together this paper called Exploring the Mandela Effect, Experienced and Recalled Reality for 25,210 Survey Respondents versus Current Recorded History. I'm a PhD. I'm a PhD in a science field. I don't want to give a ton of background here, but I've certainly spent my time doing research before. I've written like a 300-page peer-reviewed dissertation. I've written multiple peer-reviewed articles in science journals before. So I have a fair amount of background, and I wanted to go apply that background to something that I didn't think most mainstream scientists would touch in the slightest, and it's this thing called the Mandela Effect. So this paper is quite long. I got 85 pages here, and I know that a lot of people aren't necessarily going to want to walk through 85 pages of like straight up text. I do have a lot of images. I tried very hard not to make this just some scientist paper, but also sort of readable at the same time. So I broke in with convention a little bit. But it's my hope to sort of walk you through this and maybe try to save you some of the hassle of reading 83 pages like you see up here. 83 is quite a bit. So I like this quote. This actually came from one of the people that took this, the quiz or the poll. I'll kind of refer to it either way. But people accept the reality they're presented with. I, on the other hand, tend to question our perception of reality to a certain degree. And it's just such a like paraphrased thing that I just feel like he's got a lot of caveats in there. It's pretty funny that, you know, I question our perception, but only to a certain degree. Some people accept it, but only like this whole Mandela effect thing is really about getting at how do you perceive the universe. And unfortunately, the Mandela effect ones are not really the strongest effects that are out there. We'll talk about Toto effects too. But the Mandela effect ones are a lot subtler, and they don't seem to be quite as impactful. They're more easily dismissed. So we're going to start here with some of the easier ones, and hopefully this has some kind of media presence, which will draw people to the other things that we're investigating. So if you haven't taken this quiz in the paper, there's a couple different quizzes that are here. The Mandela effect one is this one. This is the paper that, or this paper references all the results that we got out of this quiz. There's a second quiz that's kind of the quickest out of all the quizzes that I put together. It has some of the Mandela effects, some of the Toto effects. It doesn't ask you a lot of side questions. It's just trying to get people that wouldn't spend a lot of time on this to take a look. And then there's a third one, and then this third quiz is pretty extensive. It goes into just about every single major Mandela and major Toto effect that I can get at. So if you're feeling inspired or spunky or something, and this Mandela effect is actually impacting you, feel free to take more than one of them. So the abstract here, the Mandela effect is a difference between reported realities of a group of people relative to the current recorded history. So what's that mean? The Mandela effect, people remember something, and it's not just one person, but it's a group of people. And what they remember is different than the reported reality of a whole host of people. So like what is actually recorded, what Google, what Wikipedia will say, it's totally different than what an entire group of people. And that group of people could be small, it could be big. And some of these, the Mandela effect is up as high as 90% of the people. And in other ones, I think it's like 15 or 20%. So there's a range. But as soon as you start getting a difference between most people remember it this way, and it seems in these couple isolated cases that people remember it very differently, that's where we start getting into the Mandela effect. So a lot of people are willing to accept the Mandela effect. The term was coined by Fiona Broome. She's a paranormal investigator. She's been doing this for 5 or 10 years or something. And it was actually named after Nelson Mandela. People thought that he died 20 years ago. The most common answer is something like in the mid 90s, I believe. Maybe it's mid 80s. We'll get into that later. But, people thought that he died in prison 20 years ago, that there were like riots that erupted afterwards, lots of violence. People remember hearing stories. They were told in school they would have like campus meetings about this or something. So it stuck with a lot of people. And then they find out, no, he's actually been in prison for the last 30 years. And then he died of old age or disease or something. People he didn't die in this like massive riot. And the fact that people have like this really strong sense of he died earlier versus like, well, he just died now and he was president. When the hell did that happen? So that's really this Mandela effect and trying to get at the root of this. The mainstream answer is something, they call it confabulation, which is basically like people forget or people confuse. Like it seems like maybe a story gets out and it's confusing, so people remember it more than one way or the other. Or sometimes there are legitimately more than one answers that are out there. Maybe publishers put out two different versions of the same thing. So sometimes things aren't actually Mandela effects. They're just like confused audience because the name changed sometime around. So as like a Mandela effect researcher, you gotta be careful about what you're looking at and what you're not. So anyways, I got a table of contents. We're basically going to go through the sort of general thing. I've talked about a bunch of the forewords, so I can skip this. So I guess he died in the mid 80s, and for this is Nelson Mandela. So he died in the mid 80s, and it was something like 15% of the people in this survey thought that he died in the mid 80s. So 15% is relatively small, but you'll see I put some controls in this thing, and the controls are pretty good down up to 5% error. So anything more than 5% error, I'm going to start thinking like, oh, well, this might actually be a real Mandela effect as opposed to just people misremembering or something. Misremembering has like a 5% error bar to me. So we're up to 15%. So I feel pretty certain that this is a statistically significant result that it is unlikely you would get to 15% versus the controls. So we'll get into that. This is like a little bit of background on me, and so I don't want to dive into this too much. I talked about myself enough. So anyways, let's get into this. We talked about Nelson Mandela, and so I mentioned Toto effect. So Danny, who runs this blog called Removing the Shackles, fantastic blog. It is certainly a counterculture blog that she runs this thing called Conspicuous News, and she'll share stories and articles and an approach of just asking a lot of questions that the mainstream isn't going to ask. Does everything she say, is it automatically correct? No, but man, it certainly, she raises some of the best questions of anybody that I watch on the web. So anyways, the name itself for this Toto effect, it's an allusion to Wizard of Oz when Dorothy tells Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore, which itself is actually a Mandela effect. So the lines are either Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, or Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. So just like people don't remember her saying, I have a feeling, like that didn't come into this. She said, I don't think we're in Kansas. So anyways, the Mandela effect really comes down to some of these ones that are smaller, where you're just talking about, like a word change in the title of something or some famous movie quote, something has changed. But the Toto effect is a bit more staggering, in part because the content that it deals with, I'm grouping into more impactful categories. So an example is history. There were balloon bombings in America by Japan in World War II. 1,900 of these balloons exploded. I never learned about that. I mean, I went to some pretty great schools and I never learned about that. Another one is like the JFK assassination. When I try to view my memory, I only see 4 people in that car, and some of what I remember is like the driver turned around and maybe the driver shot him. But now there's 6 people in that car. Well, if there's 6 people, that whole theory of like the driver turned around and somehow shot through the governor to get to the back to go hit JFK, like that doesn't make a lot of sense. And that whole kind of like why that theme of how that assassination even happened? Why does everybody believe that the driver, not everybody, but lots of people believe that the driver shot him? How is that possible if he had like multiple people in between him? So just the fact that there's so many people that remember that tells me that's a strong Mandela effect, or I'm grouping this as a Toto effect. Religion's another one. There's lots of major changes in the Bible. It was this year sometime that somebody said, the King James Version of the Bible has forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Where the hell did that come from? And now you have things like mythical creatures like unicorns and mermaids. I'm not like an extensively Catholic or Christian person. I certainly grew up in like going to some of these non-denominational churches and non-denominational services. But I remember that line, the lion shall dwell with the lamb, or it was lives with. I've looked at enough of these that it kind of blurs together a little, but it was always a lion. And now it's a wolf. And the wolf, like the wolf is my favorite animal. I kind of like dig those 3 Wolf Moon shirts. I even dig the ones with Kim Jong-il because it's just a lot of good social commentary. I remember things about that wolf. And it just doesn't click with me at all. So that's a pretty strong example of like some major changes in the Bible that are happening. Some geography examples, so like the relative positions of geographic features, the prime meridian is moved, the Bahamas are probably in a different spot. That landmass of Australia, that's like way too far north to me. I don't remember Japan hugging China so close as it does. There's a bunch of other ones. There's a whole landmass kind of west of Australia that just seems to be missing. And there's some reality residue that kind of exists out there that says maybe there was something there. And a lot of people remember it, but there's like literally, if I look at a map, there's nothing west of Australia. So, and then we also have some of these physical products. So like Fruit Loops sometime became Fruit Loops and spelled differently. Or Depends diapers is now Depend diapers. And like that Depend one, like I made so many juvenile jokes of like, hey, what do really old people smell like? Depends. So like, it doesn't, the answer doesn't make any sense as depend. Or like, I remember the slogan of you can depend on depends. Like the slogan was never you can depend on depend. Like that just sounds dumb. So some of these things actually are meaningful to me. Febreze versus Febreze, Skechers versus Skechers. I do kind of remember the T, but I was not like in love with those shoes. So anyways, the Mandela effect that we're going to cover is sort of the smaller version of, it's just going to affect some of the movie lines and it's just going to affect some of the, the either the movie lines or the movie titles. And then when you get down to the Toto effect, which I'll cover in sort of different videos, that's when you get into like the meat of these. And human anatomy too. That's another one. My skull has like this brand new thing on the side of my skull. I got a bone that crosses. There's my skull used to be smooth and now it's different. My heart's in a different place. My stomach's in a different place. I don't know if you ever ate so much that you had to like loosen your belt and sit back. You're never going to have to do that again because your stomach is now right up underneath your ribs. It's not sort of down where your belt was. So like as you eat, you're not going to feel that expansion. And, I'm kind of a fat dude, so I know that I've eaten enough that my stomach has to expand, that I have to go loosen my belt, but I don't do that anymore, even if I eat too much. So there's like some kind of physical difference that's in my body. And so the question is, the easy question is there a difference between memories of lots of people and, what is recorded or what is truth now? And that's not very contentious. The really contentious piece seems to be what causes the difference. And there's not like one answer that everybody has sort of agreed upon. There's basically 2 camps that it is, some kind of memory or recollection thing versus, some kind of non-memory thing. And so when we're just talking about Mandela effects, it's pretty easy to brush off some of this stuff as just a clear memory effect. But when you bring in those Toto effects, people seem a lot less willing to say, oh, it's just memory because it's just spelling or just words. It's like history. It's like where your heart is in your body. People take that a little bit more seriously from just the limited results that I've gotten with some of these other quizzes. So I'm pretty certain that it's not just some memory thing, and that's what this whole paper is about. But there's something there. I don't know what causes it. This is why it's so fascinating to me. But to me, this paper in particular has ruled out memory, and I'll get to that. And then the question starts becoming, all right, there's lots of possibilities for what could be causing this. How do I get in there and try to figure out can I eliminate any of those and start narrowing down to just the things that we think are actually causing it? So the method, I put together this quiz. I put it out on Facebook, and when I did that, I have a lot of spirituality groups that were willing to go look at this. I didn't have a ton of science groups. So initially, the audience is sort of like kind of spiritual, hippie, kind of that was overrepresented. But, by the time that I'm up at like 25,000 people that have taken this, that's gone. Like you'll see like my favorite is like, oh, my daughter made me take this. So like you get some dad that doesn't believe any of this crap and he's now taking this quiz. So like, yeah, maybe the first couple hundred people that are in this were strongly spiritual minded and willing to go look into sort of these paranormal effects of the Mandela effect. But then after maybe the first couple hundred, it went to a big enough audience where I feel like, okay, the people that are part of this just represent mostly normal day Americans. Mostly, actually, they're not just Americans, but they're from every single continent. Not quite every single country, but basically, if that country has a internet that's pretty reliable, I have people from that country that have taken this out of the 25,000 people. So I got a pretty broad group. So the questions that I asked, each one has a question. It's followed by a question of how confident are you about your answer? And then finally, how did you know that that was the answer? So that was my methodology for this. And I think one of the things that's different about this approach in this paper than what's happened anytime or anywhere else is that I've included a couple controls. And I don't know how many of you are scientists. Most of you probably know what control is, but just in case, and I hope not to be too patronizing here, but a control is something where, like, when you do an experiment, you're trying to check on the variables. Mandela effect is this like really weird variable. So it's hard to check against. Now, normally what you want to do is you would want to find like the perfect set of conditions where absolutely nothing changes. So what would be ideal is if I had a completely separate universe that I had complete control over, and that obviously hasn't happened yet. So that one's not an option. So the closest thing I could think of is for a control is, all right, a lot of these are about media, a lot of these are about titles and things. Or just naming things. Some of them are pretty old. So why don't we just go find some books or find some events that are pretty old that had an impact, so enough people would hear them so that they'd be familiar with it, but not be like the driving force of their life. It's not like, name CNN or Fox News, because everybody should be able to go do that just fine. I wanted something where it had a little bit of memory to it too, just because a lot of the people that are trying to debunk Mandela effect as being, oh, it's just your memory failing. If I did things that were only a year old, they'd say, well, that doesn't prove anything. Some of the stuff that's on here is like 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years old. It does lead the question of, well, is that just a memory problem? So I picked some examples that were old on purpose so that some debunker couldn't look at me and say, oh, it's just a memory thing. So let's look at the first one. It was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. With Buffy, I had 22,402 people answer this question. 96.7 of them chose what I'm calling the correct answer, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's no Mandela effect here, so there's no question whether it was the A or Buffy Vampire Slayer. It's just Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's the only one that you could have chosen to actually get this right, and there's no Mandela effect. So 96.7% of everybody got this right. And then I also asked that question, how confident are you? When you get up into the extremely confident people, you do see an increase. 98.8% of people were able to go get this one correct, that were extremely confident. So that tells me people's memories don't really suck. Like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer versus Buffy a Vampire Slayer. That sounds pretty similar. Buffy Vampire Slayer, that sounds pretty similar. So just from a sound or just from like a memory thing, these ones are all close enough that somebody should be able to forget them or just confuse them or something. But they don't. They get it 98.8% correct. So this is one of the ways that I know, okay, the memory of these folks that are taking this are actually pretty good. Only 1.2% got that thing wrong. So this is what that looks like graphically. Almost everybody gets this one correct. There's a small group that got it wrong, but I'm pretty happy about that result. Now, the next one is in 1993, the FBI, ATF, and Texas National Guard hosted a 51-day siege of Branch Davidian complex. There's controversy around their decision to burn down the facility. I mean, they're kind of jerks for having done that, or ruthless murderers, if you'd like to call them that. But what's not controversial is what is the name of the group. Everybody agrees that the name of the group is Branch Davidians. So here you can see in the total number of people that chose this. So first off, we saw like a big drop in actually the number of people that were even willing to answer this question. So it's only something like 40% of the audience is willing to answer this. And of those 40%, when everybody is included, you can see 85.1% got it right. That's mediocre. I really would not like to have to to say there's a 15% error bar on every single question based off of memory. So this is pretty large. But what ended up coming out of this was that of the extremely confident people, 95.1% got it right. So this was a really interesting result. What this meant is that if I can get people to not guess at all, the moderately confident people are sort of partially guessing, and I mean you can see they're down at 62.4 correct, 62.4% correct. So that's not great. What I really want is this really high number. So in order to go kind of evaluate the rest of the results, yes, people in general do actually seem to have some memory flaws, but the people that were extremely confident didn't. So to me, this one kind of sets the bar. If you are extremely confident, it means that you are 95% likely to get this thing right. And so everybody that didn't get it right, that's okay. I'm not forcing everybody to remember everything. You don't have to do that in order to be sort of like a valuable participant in this. But you do have to, what it shows me is that only the extremely confident people are reliable enough with their memory to say, okay, I know the answer to that and I'm going to get it right. And then they do actually get it right. So to me, my threshold that I keep in my head now is that if you see a 5% error, that's probably just due to memory. And if you see more than a 5% error, okay, now we could actually be into Mandela Effect realm. And not just with everybody, because with everybody it's closer to 15%. But when we're just talking about the extremely confident people, your error bar there is 5%, and then sort of larger than that, to me, you start getting into Mandela Effect zone. So let's get into some of the questions that happened here. You have Berenstain Bears. Berenstain Bears was huge. I mean, there's something like 260 million of these things that got sold out there. Everybody, just about every single American family at some point has seen the Berenstain Bears. And you can obviously see what my bent is here, the way that I say it. Their name is technically the Berenstain Bears, which just sounds so completely foreign to me. But so when I get to extremely confident people, for the actual real answer of what, Wikipedia and what the family says and all that, it's 17.8%. And there is a whopping 82% of the extremely confident people, some 12,000, that said, no, it's Berenstain Bears. And, you have conversations like, well, is it Stein, like Frankenstein or Frankenstein? Is it, I guess the conversation is it Steen or Stein? Rather than, is this like a stain on your shirt? So, like the context is not super easy to confuse. It's not super hard to pronounce the difference between Steen and stain. People would hear that differently. They'd know it differently. So that whole thing, to me, this one I'm not the only one that remembers this as Steen. In fact, most people do. And so is 82% larger than 5%? Yes, quite substantially. This one feels like a real Mandela effect to me. It's pretty substantial, and most of the people just remember it differently than the actual answer. And so, Berenstain, this is what I remember. Berenstain is almost like a made-up word to me. Okay, so, and we'll get into more details on all these. I'm just trying to go talk mostly about what is the, what are we seeing here? So for Sex and the City, this was another hugely popular show. It ran for, 6 years. It was on HBO. Everybody was talking about it. And when you're looking at the total of people, you see 43% remember this as Sex and the City, and 56% see this as Sex and the City. And then when you get into the extremely confident people, you can see 57% of your audience believes that this was Sex in the City. And not many people were fooled by my detractor here, but basically here again you're seeing is 57% larger than 5%. Yes, quite substantially. So this is another one that looks to me, just on my first glance at this, that that's a real Mandela effect that's there. And then also I included some of these memes, and I'm sorry that they're not all totally tasteful, but people just kind of put memes up there on the internet, and so without looking all that hard, there's a bunch of people, there's some images and some other things that we'll get into, but people remember it as Sex and the City, and it's easy to see for that. Then you also get the Star Wars one is probably like the biggest one that's out there. Maybe not entirely, but it's the one that's the most in question. Tommy Boy has Luke, I am your father, as he talks into the fan. So everybody's like, oh, Tommy Boy got it wrong, and that's why nobody can remember the line. We're going to see that this is actually a real Mandela effect. So anyways, in terms of I am your father, which was one of the answer choices, for everybody it was 8.4%. So maybe that was possibly a Mandela effect, that in some version of reality, people were just saying, I am your father. For Luke, I am your father, that's 73.5%. And then no, I am your father, a paltry 8.4%. And then when you get into the extremely confident people, I look at I am your father, and this actually falls underneath the that 5% threshold. So especially because I am your father, Luke, I am your father, and no, I am your father are pretty similar. Like they all mean the same things. Some of these Mandela effects, like the differences change. It changes what the actual meaning is. All of these, it ends up with, dude, I'm your dad. And there's no substantial difference other than like a little bit of like how much force you're feeling. Sorry to say force, but how much force you're feeling that line with. Luke, I am your father feels just so much more dramatic than no, I am your father, and it's certainly more than like, hey, I'm your dad. So this 4.1% doesn't really hit that mark. So I initially considered maybe that's in a Mandela effect, but I don't think it is. Really, the only two that are Mandela effects worthy are sort of Luke, I am your father, and no, I am your father. So the real line is no, I am your father, but just about everybody and their mother remember 77% of them say no, he included the word Luke that was in there. So it's possible that some of that stuff, like, this is the ultimate debate. You have things like Tommy Boy saying, Luke, I am your father, into the fan that confuses everybody. Did he say, Luke, I am your father, and that's where everybody got the mistake from, and that was what caused this whole Mandela effect to happen? Or did he say, Luke, I am your father, because that, in the reality that both of those came from, that Luke, that Star Wars line, and also the Tommy Boy incident afterwards, both of those came from the same timeline, same reality or something, and then it only merged, and now we get the two options, but the second option didn't exist for that Tommy Boy line. So I know that's a little confusing, but the question is, look, Mandela effect, when you see kind of reality residue and something is different, or like you have things that match that Mandela effect that you're seeing, the question is, did that cause it, or is that a symptom of the Mandela effect being there? So we'll get into that some more as we scroll through some of the other ones here. But, just graphically, it seems like most people remember Luke, I am your father. Okay, so NASA's sent out a whole bunch of manned missions. Technically, there were 6 manned missions that landed on the moon, and then there were another 3 that orbited the moon. And so the question is, how many manned trips have there been? And when you look at the extremely confident people, 50% say 0 to 2, 20% say 3 to 6, 7 to 10 say, or there's 9% that say 7 to 10, and then there's this 11 plus that's at 18.2%. So the actual answer for this is only 10%. Basically, everybody else remembers way fewer, and then there's a handful of people that remember way more. So I don't really understand where we got to this answer. And in fact, it's even weirder than this, because I started asking, as part of the question of, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I asked them, are you like an astronomy enthusiast? And for those people, just the extremely confident ones, let's go look at the map for that. You can see that most people said, 0 to 2. A handful of people, again, said 3 to 6. The smallest number of people guessed 7 to 10, which is the actual answer. And then you get to 11 or more. And, basically everybody is guessing anything but the actual answer. So maybe that means all these people are terrible and they're actually really bad astronomy enthusiasts. But let's go look at the people that said, I'm an astronomy professional. Okay, so now, same kind of deal. You're seeing for the manned trips, and this is just the extremely confident people, 50% thought it was just 0 to 2, 20% thought it was 3 to 6. The correct answer one, only 14% thought that was true, and then more than 10 is 17.4. And this is just like shocking to me. Like you're in a lab, you're doing astronomy research every day. Like you got to be hanging off of what SpaceX and NASA are doing. You're like your office conversations, what you're talking about at conferences. It's got to be about what the big government programs are doing, and only 14% got that technically correct. Like that's just a shocking result. You don't get to be like a PhD physicist or PhD astronomer and not know basic details about your field. So this is one of those answers that is kind of mind-boggling, but again shows that it seems like there's some real evidence out there that Mandela effect is something more than just like a memory recall problem. I believe that physicists can remember. So then we got to the sort of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs quote. And actually, there's two quotes. I should have been carefuler when I wrote the survey, but one of the quotes is, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And maybe it was, "Who is the fairest of them all?" I see it both ways on the internet when trying to look for this. So my memory is not good enough to differentiate between who's and who is. But at least for Magic Mirror, it's "Magic Mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" I mean, these two things don't even sound anything alike. They're pretty damn different. So when I get to this, so we're going to get to extremely confident. Mirror, mirror, 90.7% of people remember, they've probably watched this movie a million times as a kid. Then they watched it another million times when they had their own kids. And so everybody sees this thing over and over and over and over and over again. And you hear the line, it's "Mirror, mirror on the wall." Magic mirror, you're like addressing someone. You're like, "Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all?" You're talking to them. But that whole thing, she's a witch. She's not just talking to the mirror. She's casting a spell. She's saying, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" It's a spell. And so Magic Mirror, where you're addressing somebody, doesn't make any sense. But this whole mirror, mirror thing makes a ton of sense to me. And so, you see we are well above the 5% threshold. Like the people that... I see a lot of answers are the people who have recently been watching it. So like somehow they just started watching it again. Maybe they just had kids, or maybe they are young, because some young people actually took this. The people that are just watching it now, they say it's Magic Mirror. But for just about everybody else that grew up, they grew up hearing something totally different. And that's 90% of us. Okay, so then the question was interview with a vampire or interview with the vampire. So the results here for the extremely confident only, most people remembered interview with a vampire. It was 77.8%. And in fact, this title drives me nuts, because the answer isn't just, if I was being really technical rather than just trying to get at the main point here, the full title now is interview with the vampire, the Vampire Chronicles. Like, I never saw the Vampire Chronicles when I was watching this. I mean, just like everybody else, it sparked this whole, like, goth movement. It became this really popular thing. So everybody, lots of people remember it as Interview with a Vampire. I think if I included the full title, people might have taken a step back and said, "Oh, that actually does look kind of weird." But it's not, to most people it was Interview with a Vampire, not Interview with the Vampire. And I'll talk about this sort of in the results, but, like, the or the changes the meaning. So if it's interview with a vampire, you like the person doing the interview is just talking with one of many vampires, which is what you see. If it's interview with the vampire, it's only possible that you were talking to one vampire. Now sometimes people say like he is the boxer. Like, obviously there are other boxers, but when you say the boxer, you're trying to say like they are the best boxer of all time. So like Muhammad Ali wasn't a boxer, he's the boxer. So it's possible that you could be talking about sort of the penultimate vampire in this case. But Lestat was cool and all, and yeah, it was Tom Cruise, and everybody likes Tom Cruise, but he wasn't like the world's greatest, most powerful, uniquely awesome vampire. He was a vampire, and there was an interview with a vampire, and that's what that thing looked like. anyways, again, it's above that 5% threshold. We're at 77.8% remember this. That's not simply a memory problem. Wow, it's the vast majority of people that do actually remember this movie remember it as Interview with a Vampire. And actually, Tom Cruise, so I have this here and further down, but here's an interview with Tom Cruise where he says his line, or he's talking about when I saw the screenplay for Interview with a Vampire, and you can hear him clearly say Interview with a Vampire. So I feel like I'm not alone in remembering his Interview with a Vampire. Now here's the next one here is Field of Dreams. And so Kevin Costner is this kind of like broke dude in the Midwest, and he's going to go build this stadium, and the stadium is going to presumably fill with people. And so the question is, in the current version, he says, if you build it, he will come. And the other option, if you build it, they will come. And again, people don't really confuse he and they in conversation. You know, this isn't not, it's not just like, did I hear that incorrectly? Most people are able to go differentiate between he and they when you're talking. So the question is, you know, is it above the 5%? So this is another one sort of like mirror, mirror on the wall, where almost everybody doesn't remember he will come. Almost everybody, at 87.7% of those that are extremely confident, they're the people that remember this as if you build it, they will come. And I'll talk about more who they are and some of those differences, but just to sort of get some of the data in front of you, I thought I'd start there. We talked about universal blood donors. So we figured out that there were universal blood donors since about 1900. Google says the blood type is O negative, and I have to check this every single time. I have some mild recollection that it's O positive. I can't even remember my own blood type, but type O negative is what stands out. And so, you know, there were tons of people that didn't answer this. It was out of some 24,000. We're only down to 17,000. But out of those people, when everybody's considered, you know, it's basically split between O minus and O positive. There's a difference, but it's not huge. When you get to the extremely confident people, some people remember it as AB, and this is actually above that 5% threshold. So some universe, it might have actually been AB, or some different part of our reality. You know, I'll talk about it being a different universe, or maybe it's a different timeline. I have no idea what causes the Mandela effect. I don't want to give off that sense. I don't know what causes the Toto effect. That's a really huge question. But I'm pretty confident after I saw the controls and after I saw these results that it's not simply just like some memory thing or a recall thing. But anyways, you know, of the remaining people that didn't think it was AB, you're basically split between O minus and O positive. Now, for the general population, not being able to remember if it's O minus or O positive, that, you know, maybe that's not the world's biggest thing, and people could potentially forget that. But let's go think about medically trained people. And I guess maybe the first one here is these are medical professionals. So the medical professionals, only 5% now thought it was AB. 222 thought it was O minus. So about 60% thought it was O minus, but a whopping 37% of people that are practicing medicine day in and day out thought this thing was O positive. That basically just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. How can you have a medical professional, somebody who like went through not only high school, then they went through college, they were some of the best test takers in college, they were actually able to go like ace all the hard courses, they took organic chemistry, they passed it, then they scored high enough on like the MCATs and the nursing exams to get into schools. These are the best memorizers of facts in the entire world, and they can only get to 37%. 37% of them still thought it was something different. I mean, this isn't even like a D. If I were just grading this question, this is like, you know, this is a failure. So how did the medical professionals that do this day in and day out not even know their own like blood types? That's just shocking to me. And the same kind of story is over here for the medically trained people. You know, these numbers are a lot bigger. You know, I have 222, 141, and 19. You know, that's enough people where I'd trust the data that's coming out of that. It's not like 20 people where maybe that's just some local thing. This is, you know, some 200, 300, almost 400 people that are medical professionals that took this quiz. And then you get down here to the medically trained, and now we're talking about, 1100, 2000, I guess it's 2,280 roughly. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of medically trained people. And again, you're seeing the same kind of thing. A certain percentage of them thought it was AB, and then you get to O minus, and with that O minus, half of them got it right. But then there's as many as 43% that thought it was this O positive thing. So how do the people that are medically trained, those that have done EMTs, paraprofessionals, that, maybe they are fighter fighters, maybe they're policemen, who maybe they're lifeguards or teaching classes, but these are people that have taken courses where, presumably on the test, it would ask a question like, what's the universal blood donor type? And I'm just kind of flabbergasted that 43% of the people that are medically trained don't know what that is. And again, don't get me wrong, I don't think that they don't know. I think that the Mandela effect is strong in this one. Okay, so Mandela effect is actually named after Nelson Mandela. So when I asked these people, when did he die? Or I asked, did he die in prison? And I think I said something like, did he die in prison 20 or 30 years ago? The answers was, of the extremely confident people, 15% of people thought that he died in prison years ago, and 85% of people think that he did not. So maybe that's just folks that also remembered him dying in 2013 again. I don't really know, but this is 5% or less? No, this is 15%. So this is above my memory threshold. This seems like a real Mandela effect. And that's, this is obviously the one that got this whole thing kicked off. So then I started asking questions about, why did this happen? So I didn't tell them any of the scores or anything. I just said, why do you think that this Mandela effect is going on? And so, they could choose more than one of these. So if you try to total up the percents, it's going to be over 100%, because there's 25,000 people that answered, and then you have, 35,000 responses. So it's not one-to-one. Some people chose more than one, but people are just misremembering things. That's a pretty big contingent. Some people think that we're moving in and out of timelines. There were about 25% of the people are conspiracy theorists. And so you can see a subsection of those conspiracy theorists mostly think that maybe the government's involved in this somehow. Some people thought this is just a stupid, meaningless experiment. And I get that, hey, just a couple people misspelling this stuff. Who the hell cares? We're going to hopefully see that number go down, but this is a conspiracy of one sort or another, and they're not entirely sure. A lot of people thought other, and that other kept coming up as, I don't know. I have no idea what's causing this. CERN, the big Large Hadron Collider, the sort of particle stuff, that's out there too. Somebody caused a glitch in the matrix. This is sort of from this camp of people that think that we're living in a simulation. And so a glitch in the matrix is sort of like the program that we all live in is changed. So you can see some people think it's that. And then this one kind of goes up here with this one, simply misremembered, or maybe they just kind of misheard it. They just misheard that Nelson Mandela died and there were riots and there was a bloody mess afterwards. They misheard that. So I don't know. That one doesn't. So I understand that if you haven't seen any data and you're just kind of brushing off some of these things, those answers make a lot of sense to me. And then I started asking, when did you find out about this? It seems like some very small population, maybe about 15% of the, 12 to 15% was aware of this before 2015. But then it really, I started getting some memories that were all mixed up, and I started noticing this around July 2015, which is why I included that date specifically. And it seems like I'm not the only one. It seems like, 19% remember of it immediately affecting them in July of 2015. And then, maybe some people didn't see it. Maybe you weren't exposed to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Maybe you don't have kids, or maybe you're not a kid. So you wouldn't have seen the things that have changed around you. So I don't think that this is, maybe it's still them happening afterwards and it continues into 2016, but it might just be the one time that something changed in July of 2015 and then other people are just now getting exposed. I don't have the answer to that, but that's it. It looks like for the most people, this thing happened in July 2015. And then for some other subsection of people, it looks like it happened earlier. So maybe timeline, if it's like a timeline thing, maybe timelines have been merging earlier. If it's some continuum thing, maybe the universe is collapsing, expanding, or whatever, and we're bumping into other universes. Maybe CERN's been active. I don't know, but it looks like for most people, it didn't affect them until July 2015 of the year 2015. Okay, so scrolling down here, then I started showing people the answers, right? So after I had 500 people answer, I got some pretty good evidence. It wasn't perfect, but I could start showing them that it wasn't just like 5% of the people misremember these things. It was 72% remember it as Sex in the City. 74% thought it was Luke, I Am Your Father. 93% thought it was Mirror, Mirror. So there was enough meat there to say, this isn't just some small portion of the population. It's a lot of the people that are doing this. And then when you compare that to the controls, man, the controls are a lot stronger. And I think I changed this now. I actually show, for the extremely confident, the Davidians one was up to 95%. So the people can remember, and they can remember at 95%. So if it's not a memory thing, what the hell is causing this? So you do see a drop of people that are willing to look at data and then say, oh, well, based off of that data, I guess it's less of a memory thing. Although it conflicts with their viewpoint. So maybe not right that minute are they willing to change their mind, but I'm willing to bet that if I keep running like a survey like this over time, I'm going to see this being a memory problem go down and down and down. And then you start getting these other ones. All right, more people might be accepting of the fact that there's parallel universes. Whether when they saw data, it didn't really change if it was a government conspiracy or not. The number of people that thought it was a meaningless, idiotic experiment went down. That's good. That made me feel a little better. This is a conspiracy, so the conspiracy theorists are not really changing their opinions after data. Take that for what you will. Society collectively misheard like a bad game of telephone. So maybe, I guess some more people, we lost some of the memory folks, but more people thought, okay, well, maybe they're just mishearing things. Maybe it's not going to be CERN. So there was some change after people have seen some data. And again, this is just the data for the Mandela effect. There's not really a whole lot of there's not a lot of Toto effects. Toto effect data, I've already seen some of the preliminaries on there. It looks pretty different than this. Most people are now, if they see not just the Mandela effects, but they see Mandela and Toto effects, they're like, whoa, okay, maybe this isn't just a memory thing. There's still some hardcore memory folks. And those are probably the people that, for them, it's always been Stain. And for them, it's always been Magic Mirror. And they look at this and you're like, everybody else is crazy but me. And I totally understand and respect that viewpoint, because if I were standing in their shoes, everybody else would look totally crazy. So there are some hardcore, no matter what you say, it's just a memory thing. But for most people, especially when they could seen the Toto effect data, they change their mind too. So then I started asking some questions about who are you, what are you doing, like where are you in life. Tell me a little bit about yourself. So some of the people that did this were religious, some were spiritual. 25% of the people that took this are conspiracy theorists. So that's actually a pretty high population. I don't know if the whole American population is that high, but I sort of fit into that category of conspiracy theorist as well. So to go here, 25% of my American brethren are also questioning the government. That sounds pretty good to me. That number might actually be higher than what I would have given it credit for. 9% said they were a scientist. 12% said they were a loner. 6% said they were a media avoider. 9.4% said they were something other. 25% said they're none of these categories. 20% said they're someone who thinks people are idiots. And then there seems to be a small contingent of UFOologists and ET researchers that are out there too. So this to me, like, if I had seen everybody, I started on some spiritual pages. If I had seen 90% spiritual, then, maybe this data wouldn't make any sense. Or if I had seen, 90% conspiracy theorists, because that's what I had posted on initially, okay, then maybe this data wouldn't make any sense as sort of like a broader picture of what America looks like. But this to me kind of looks like a pretty healthy distribution of people. At least initially, it makes me feel like I'm not just getting one homogeneous group, and this is what that one homogeneous group thinks. It looks like this is a pretty good range of people. And then I asked for ages. So, people younger than 13, I was a small percent. There were a bunch of teenagers, a bunch of 20-year-olds, a bunch of 30-year-olds, fewer 40, fewer 50, fewer 60, and then it dropped off pretty quickly after that. But, it's also not like I have just, all teenagers that are answering this and giving me random answers. I got a lot of people from a lot of different age ranges that are looking at this too. And that made me feel pretty good. Then we get into like the testimonials. So this was some of like the most impactful things to me were the people with photographic memories. And there's examples of every single one of these. I certainly don't have time to read them all, but I have a photographic memory. I can still see to this day my hands on a Berenstain Bears book. I'm 150% visual. I don't have a perfect photographic memory like is talked about, but shape, order, etc. are my forte. The Chick-fil-A logo, that's different. JCPenney's now different. And so people start sharing some of these other ones. I have an almost photographic memory, yet I didn't do very well. So what's going on there? I have a photographic memory and psychic abilities. The things I remember etched in my mind permanently and accurately. The fact that anyone thinks Berenstain or O positive or any of the other things really freaks me out. I did not notice these things until last year. What happened in 2015 that shifted everyone? So there's somebody with a photographic memory. My memory is terrible. But here's somebody with a photographic memory that's feeling and seeing the exact same things that I am. Definitely started with Berenstain Bears. I have this great memory. I was obsessed with the books. I have a very good memory. Is my memory failing me? So that's kind of a recurring theme for these people that have exceptional memories. I have a photographic memory. I can see the image of the words very clearly in my head. So there's absolutely no way I could be wrong with the spelling of the words that are now spelled differently. So it's like they got two different sets of memories. It's just scary to me because I remember these. I have a photographic memory, so it's telling me my memories aren't real or right. This is a big one. She talks about Statue of Liberty is not in the same place. The Kennedy assassination is different. Lots of different parts there. I began researching. I have a photographic memory, so it's strange when I miss details, and it spooked me because the things I was noticing weren't just noticed once. I noticed them, and I felt extremely uncomfortable. And he even goes in, and this person, I guess it's a he, I'm betting, they talk about, I remember things different than what my girlfriend remembered. There's this great video on the internet somewhere of a couple talking about the Mandela effect, and I think it's something like the guy's putting mayonnaise on his sandwich, and the girl's like, or she puts mayonnaise on a sandwich that she makes for him, and he's like, I can't eat this. This is disgusting. I hate mayonnaise, and I never touch it. And she's like, this is a sandwich that I've been making you our entire relationship. What do you mean you don't like this? And they were aware of the Mandela effect, and they start looking at each other like, I don't think I'm the same me. And so, what does that even mean? The Mandela effect starts getting into these really personal ones as well as trying to remember some of these other ones. And this is somebody with a photographic memory. So it's not, I don't know. There's just lots of good examples like that. So that's enough of these photographic memory ones. You guys can read through all of those. Lots of these really deeply personal anecdotes too. This guy saw two different versions of everybody at one point. He kind of has this weird flashback. I wish he had included the ages of when people are around there. There's just lots of, so like I save personal letters and cards from friends and like to reread them. I noticed in the thank you note that the word phrase changed from thanks bunches to thank you loads, and sometimes it reads thanks hordes and bunches. I am known for my memory of words, dates, and trivia, and I started to doubt my sanity. Then I noticed things you have listed here and also many products have changed. It is really confusing at times. So some of these changes, like we can study the big ones, right? Because not everybody's going to know what her stinking little card said, but everybody's going to remember mirror, mirror, or magic mirror being different. So this one is it's just totally fascinating to me. Just those little ones that are there. So lots of these personal ones. Some of this is about timing. Some of it's just like, I remember the Challenger blowing up. Some of this was, I remember watching it as Luke, I am your father, and then I remember it later as being no, I am your father. So some of these folks actually have two different split memories of what they were watching. Some of these people said, remember reading it as Berenstain when I started, but then when I taught my kids, it was Berenstain. So some of these things have some changes. One person is saying here it's 2012. But there's lots of different versions of this, and again, I don't want to cover all of them. But then there's just lots of people that have these testimonials about, I watched, I worked in bookstores in the 70s, always used to wonder why customers pronounced it Berenstein when it was spelled Berenstain. So some people like remember it from day one being stain. But here I worked in recycle in 2002. I noticed Berenstein to Berenstain on old books. I read those books to my son and watched the shows with him daily. So, when you do this thing daily, you're going to hear it. So there's lots of, I'm a librarian, it's Berenstein. I remember wondering if Stan and Jan were Jewish. It turns out that they are, and we'll talk about that later, but there's there's lots of examples of this, and you guys don't want to hear every single one of them. Snow White. I remember having a toy about Snow White of a mirror, and I still having it. I'm using it right now, and she is saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, not magic mirror. So people have these toys. My parents bought this in Disney World. So she has like a sanctioned toy from Disney World that says mirror, mirror. So somehow when whatever changed, it didn't change everything. So maybe the movie changed, but some of the products didn't. So this one is like particularly fascinating to me. It says mirror, mirror. It came from Disney. It's not some knockoff toy. That is shocking to me. Here's a interview one. Interview with a Vampire was a favorite book and movie. I read Berenstein Bears a lot to my kid. I worked in shoes for 4 years, and it was spelt Skechers. So here's some of the Nelson Mandela ones. I never knew specifically about the title. Where is this? I never knew specifically about the title Mandela Effect until today, but during a few moments contemplate the concept of the Mandela Effect, having died many years ago. A sudden forgotten memory from the early 90s of Winnie Mandela, tearful and widowed, sprang into my head. So that's one of them. We have, at some point Mandela mentioned it was about apartheid. Where is this? Tank Man, that's different for a lot of people. C-3PO. He had starved to death in prison in 81 or 82. Imagine my surprise to find out he had died again. This guy is clearly ticked off. I don't stand any of this whatsoever. All I effing know is that I remember some very specific things. I have an extremely good memory of what I watch on TV and read in the news articles. This makes no effing sense. The first time I encountered this was in 2007 when I had a heated argument with a friend about Nelson Mandela dying in prison. The conversation had some unfortunately racist undertones because I remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison and there was riots in Africa for a few weeks after. And this is actually like a pretty standard line that I hear from a lot of people. It's not just that he died. There's this whole thematic story about the number of riots and the violence that happened afterwards. And then when he experiences this and the friend tells him that the news is different, it was the first time in my life I ever had a sinking feeling in my stomach. That actually comes out a bunch in the personal anecdotes too, and some of the photographic ones. Just you get this sick feeling deep in your heart, deep in your stomach of like, oh God, just everything is different now. What else do I have here? So I'll skip through some of the Nelson Mandela ones. Universal donor. About the blood type when she was asked about it. I also just asked my mom my blood type the other day and what my blood type was. She told me O plus. I swear I remember that it was AB, and that was a universal type. So maybe blood things have changed. I feel very confused at this time. I am O positive blood type, and I have a very distinct memory of a biology class in high school where we all pricked our fingers to see what our blood type was. The teacher specifically told us that O plus is a universal donor. I was also told this when I donated my blood in 1987. At this moment, I'm filled with cognitive dissonance. Things I thought were common knowledge to everyone are not. This line to me could not feel more perfect as like somebody truly experiencing the Mandela effect and sort of enveloping that feeling. That's what it feels like for a lot of people. Sex in the City. I worked at Blockbuster for 3 years. I hung up Sex in the City poster for the release. I knew it was interview with a vampire. What else do I have? Field of Dreams. Distinctly remember watching the movie. Someone said, if you build this, he will come. So some people remember it the other way. There's definitely some things here. If you build it, they will come. It's such an iconic line. But why would you ever mix up he and they? They sound nothing alike and have vastly different meanings. I always thought that they referred to the fans that would come to the field after the mysterious players showed up, allowing it to be funded. I watched this movie countless times. I'm certain they said they. I'm both a skeptic and a Catholic. He goes on to some of these things, but, this gets into, I'll talk about this later, but it's always about some of these have some really different meanings. like they versus he. In Field of Dreams, it says father is he, and the they is an audience that would come and fill up, or like all the fans would show up and pay for this weird investment that he's making in this field because of the voice in his head. So the whole story arc of the movie changes if you build it, he will come and you just see your dad. Yeah, you'll probably still go broke, but at least your dad will be there. Versus if you build it, they will come, and it's like the baseball players will come and the audience will fill up the stands. Like the whole story arc changes. So this guy kind of like shouting that into his computer makes a lot of sense to me. There's some examples of NASA. There were a couple hardcore dudes that were taking this nice quiz, but as a former space flight engineer, I am compelled to correct you on something. One thing about your moon question, you had asked something like how many NASA missions to the moon have been announced, not how many successful moon landings have landed on the moon. Of course, the answer is 6 is correct for landings, but Apollo 8, Apollo 10, and Apollo 13 were manned missions that all went to the moon, but just didn't land. They orbited the moon instead. So I had at least a part of the question, or as I posted the answers, I said it was only 6 when it was actually 9, but it didn't affect most of the quiz remained unaffected by that. But you know, a lot of the people that answered this Apollo thing thought there were only 2, and so like there was a movie Apollo 13, so maybe they just thought that they skipped a lot of numbers or something. But a lot of people only remember 2 announced things to the moon. Star Wars, there's tons of these. I can't go into all of them, but another reoccurring theme was C-3PO never had a silver leg. So that's new to lots of people. A lot of them remember Luke, I am your father. They remember doing this all the time. And then there's like a million people that just said, here's another one. I liked look up Scarecrow has a gun in Wizard of Oz. Yeah, I don't remember the Scarecrow having a gun, but that's now in the movie. Go watch it. It's there. The Little Engine That Could has a different ending. Turmeric is spelled differently. I put this one in one of the quiz. The lion shall lay down with the lamb. Now it's wolf. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. Nobody believes that one to be, well, some people remember that, but most people are saying like, it's lion. I've drawn things for lion. There's lots of art that exists for lion. Here's another one for lamb, but there's just lots of these where people bring in another one. Here's somebody that's talking about the JFK assassination. There's just tons of examples. This one is about my mother ran a daycare when I was in school. This was on all the time. It was always, and this is for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was always, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. If you watch that show now, it's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. And again, it changes the meaning. If it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, he's talking about everybody's neighborhood. If it's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, he's saying, in my neighborhood, it's beautiful here. And like on this one, I've done some research into this, which is why I'm kind of harping on this one in particular. But so Eddie Murphy made this skit. I got in a lot of trouble in school because I called somebody a scum bucket because of that skit when I was only in 3rd grade, and I almost got expelled from school and all these other things. So I remember this. So it was the spoof of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood called Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. And in Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, it was always, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And then you also have Daniel Tiger. Daniel Tiger sings, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Here are 2 different shows, both that are copying Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and they're sharing very specifically, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Why would they sing that? And, like Robinson's Neighborhood ran over 4 different episodes over like 2 different years on Saturday Night Live. Why in all 4 of those did he, quote unquote, say the line incorrectly? And then when, Daniel Tiger is actually a cartoon character, or he was a puppet that was part of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So he's sort of like the spiritual spin-off of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. How come he sings it the old way? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. You would think that the people that wrote Mr. Rogers that are now writing Daniel Tiger would know how to sing their own theme song, but apparently it's different now. And so this is one that kind of personally hits me as like the world is different, and like we all just have to get into that. Jiffy Peanut Butter, J.C. Penney, who actually shot JFK. So a lot of these things keep coming back up. Tostino was a different one. Here's one that's kind of neat. A lot of the astronomy buffs talk about The Earth used to be on the outer perimeter of the Sagittarius arm, and now it says that we're on the Orion spur. For the people that really studied astronomy that this is affecting, they recognize that the Earth is now 80,000 light years away from where we had been previously. So if you take that into account, maybe we're merging timelines, but now we have this Earth that's on the far side of the universe that we've been put onto. The whole distance of where we are, in fact, the whole solar system moved somehow. This one is particularly creepy. I don't remember how far we are or where we were in the galaxy, but for the NASA space flight engineers that say that we're now in a totally different spot, that one's pretty damn freaky. Life was like a box of chocolates. Everybody heard it as life is like a box of chocolates. Life was doesn't even make any sense. Some of the logos, it's hard to get previous examples of logos, so I couldn't put those in here. But that was all the different examples that have been put in there, and I scrolled through a lot. It's already been an hour, and I'm sorry about that, but then you start getting into what's causing this, and people have lots of different examples that are in here. God, heaven, it's revelation. There's lots of different long explanations. There's a quote from Timothy. Man, I don't remember Timothy in the Bible. I've read the Bible through once or twice now. Not a hardcore Christian or Catholic by any means, but I've read through it, and I certainly don't remember the book of Timothy. So that one's a little weird to me. Maybe somebody else can help me out on that one. Lion and Lamb, sort of some of these old stories. Again, you see Timothy getting referenced. Non-religious people saying, maybe it's misremembering. We've seen geography changing. We've seen where we are in the planet changing, or where we are in the galaxy is different than what we used to know. So there's Google is wrong. I loved lots of people said that. That's sort of like that hardcore, I can't believe this. You're still in denial about what you're seeing. That's fun. Tons of people said, I don't know. This was probably the most common answer of what's going on. They just kept saying, I don't know. I have no idea. So that one's pretty good. You see lots of people saying, this Luke, I am your father ones sent them for a loop. A lot of people said it was a collection of these. So lots of people said it's not just one, but it's a couple. You see a handful of the people, TV is hypnotizing us. So maybe that's one of the government is causing this. Maybe it is time travel. I don't know how time travel causes us to be on the opposite side of the universe, but that's one that's kind of worth looking at. And then you see lots of people going back to, well, it's just conflation or it's memory or something. But when I look at the data, it just doesn't make any sense. Why do these space flight engineers remember that they are on the opposite side of the galaxy than what they currently are on? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. So I can pass over a lot of these things. I saw a bunch of people that were abductees, or I had a near-death experience. So maybe some of that plays into why they think some of these things. But just lots of people remember this. So I've done a lot of the discussion, so hopefully I'm not going to spend another hour doing this. But, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, again, Buffy the versus Buffy the meanings are different. Because the meanings are different, people tend not to confuse them. When you look at the people that get it right, it's 98.8%. That's pretty amazing. Here's Waco. This is sort of an iconic image. People remember, maybe not everybody, but the people that remember and were extremely confident did a really good job guessing this. And so that's where my 5% threshold came from. And then for for Berenstain Bears, this is actually, it kind of made some noise. It got into Vice, it got into 17, it got into AV Club and Yahoo. They all ran stories in this. In fact, it was so big that the National Post, and it looks like I misspelled National, but the National Post got in touch with the son of Stan and Jan Berenstain to ask him, Michael, about their family name. Michael Berenstain says their family were Ukrainian Jews who immigrated to the USA, and the immigration officer converted their Ukrainian name, which they say his family pronounced something like Berenstein, and he says the name became Berenstain and has never been changed post-immigration. And to clarify, he says it Berenstain, like coffee stain, jello stain, or wine stain. And nobody would confuse, like, look, you got the Slavic name. I get it. People could confuse anything Slavic in English, but you don't confuse stain with steen or stein, because there's a word stain, and steen and stein have these like strong Jewish, like everybody else that came through Ellis Island got steen. I don't know why this one dude got stain, or this one family. So, I remember them being Jews. I thought it was pretty funny that I was reading a bunch of stories about a whole bunch of Jewish bears that were in the middle class. Like that just struck me as funny. I wouldn't have confused that with, it's Berenstain. There aren't any Jews named Berenstain, or Stain isn't a common Jewish last name, so I don't understand why I ever would have had that memory about that. Anyways, so people in the internet have found, again, it's tricky to say, is this reality residue? So here's Berenstain Bears and Berenstain Bears and Berenstain Bears. It's actually on the side of these videotapes. So you can actually find a couple examples. It's so rare though. I think I've only seen 2 images of this on the web that I believe. So, is this the cause? Is the fact that one video out there had Berenstain on it, and that's the reason why everybody thinks it's Berenstain? Like, that feels pretty far-fetched to me. The fact that you can see it, that says to me that there's some reality residue left over from wherever we came from, wherever I came from. And I don't know where that was. I don't know if it's a different reality, different universe, or my soul moved, or we went through a wormhole. I have no idea. Here's one too. I'm glad the title is Strangers. Something is certainly strange about this. It has Berenstain on the top, and it has Berenstain on the side. That's another really weird one. So maybe the guy, the marketing guy, just did a spelling mistake, but A and E aren't all that close, and when you release these movies, somebody has to go check the copy. So how did both of these get on the same one? Totally weird. But anyways, I can only find 1 or 2 examples of this, so I highly doubt that this one tape caused everybody in the world to think that it's Berenstain as opposed to Berenstain. It's just almost all of us have a completely different memory of what this thing was. And then for Google Trends, you can look and see, all right, nobody cared about Berenstain up until, July of 2015. And now everybody and their mother is looking up, what the hell is a Berenstain Bear? So it's not like there were some new releases. It's like hip hop artists and other people started, and Teen and Vogue and everybody else started asking the question of, when did Berenstain Bears change? And no, it never changed. The family says it was always Berenstain, but it certainly felt like it changed for the rest of us. So here's Sex and the City versus Sex in the City. And again, one of the things, I remember it being Sex in the City because Sex in the City is such a slutty title. Sex in the City. It's like some sleazy show. Sex and the City is sort of like this juxtaposition of, let's go talk about sex, sexual intercourse, and possibly some gender roles and how that relates to your life in the city. That just feels totally like the titles are different. It's like one is sort of this intellectual exploration of the consequences of sex sex in this metropolitan environment, and the other one of Sex in the City is about a bunch of broads getting laid in the middle of the city. It just feels dirtier and sluttier. So to me, it feels like it makes a lot of sense that people would not confuse. It's not just a hearing thing. People wouldn't confuse these titles. And actually, so again, there's some physical products where you could get into this. You click this link, it'll bring you to YouTube, and the guy flips open a whole bunch of boxes and some marketing materials that has Sex in the City written on them. When you watch the Emmy Awards, and even Sarah Jessica Parker, she's on some TV show and she keeps calling it Sex in the City. So the actress herself refers to it as Sex in the City. And then you get to the Emmy Awards and 8 people in a row for all the awards it's winning, they all call it Sex in the City. You would think at the Emmy Awards, people would know better than to call something by the wrong name. And you would think that 8 people giving them awards would know not to go call it by the wrong name, but that's apparently not what happens. So again, for Sex in the City, I don't see the same kind of thing for July 2015 here. So I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe this one will take off. Maybe that's not quite as popular as the other ones. Maybe it is. It looks like it goes back. So it does look like Here, this data actually, so you have some people that see this and or they saw like the first release or hear some of the movies that come out, and they're typing in Sex in the City. And then they're also typing in Sex and the City. And this is before most people sort of like got into this whole Mandela effect thing is real. So it does seem like some people are actually Googling maybe the wrong words. And so maybe up to 25%, something like that. I don't know. So like maybe my threshold of 5% is too low, but maybe it's closer to 20% or something for this to actually be a Mandela effect. But I'm seeing some pretty strong evidence that in the past people have Googled both, but they don't do it every single time. So this data is still kind of sits out there as kind of weird to me, and I haven't quite figured out what to make of it. I haven't seen a spike in July of 2015, and I do actually see people looking for Sex in the City well before. So that one's kind of odd. Here's Star Wars. So my favorite one is James Earl Jones. Maybe let's see if I can actually do this. If I click on this, I will allow this. So if I click on this thing, it'll bring me to James Earl Jones.
If you only knew the power of the dark side. When I first saw the dialogue that said, "Luke, I am your father," I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're going to play that liar.
So you heard him, right? You heard him say, "Luke, I am your father." Let's hear it again.
I wonder how they're going to play that lie. He's lying. I am your father.
Oops. Let me try this one more time.
Luke, I am your father.
So you can hear James Earl Joe himself say this. That to me is pretty staggering. And then let me get back to my PDF. So now it's not there, but it's actually twice. This one's even funnier. So we can go watch this.
What about the jokes? I heard that you would tell a joke before every production.
Yeah, we had a tradition of telling jokes right before, at places, right before curtain. The filthier the better.
Always naughty, either ethnically naughty or sexually naughty.
Not for morning TV.
Well, we've got one. Should we do it?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Okay. What does the redneck Jedi say?
No, you asked that because I'm a redneck or because I'm a Jedi?
No, because we're both rednecks.
Okay.
But
the redneck Jedi says, "Luke, I am your father and your uncle."
Yeah, hilarious. It's hilarious, but it's also evidence that James Earl Jones himself thinks of that line as being, "Luke, I am your father." And then you see Tommy Boy and he's saying into the fan, "Luke, I am your father." And the Simpsons have this thing where it's, "Luke, I am your father." You know, BuzzFeed and Telegraph run stories that it's one of the top misquoted lines. Well, you better go include James Earl Jones and the guy that can't even pronounce his own lines, right? So that one's just so weird. There's just a lot of Mandela. It just, my line for this is, "The force is strong with this Mandela effect." It's just a lot that looks weird. And so here's one, you have some of the movie releases come out, and then prior to 2015, nobody cares. So like nobody is confusing "Luke, I am your father" with "No, I am your father." In fact, nobody even thinks the line going back is "No, I am your father." And then when the movie, which one is this? Force Awakens comes out, and you get another big spike. And so each one of these, a movie comes out, you get a spike, and then it kind of dies off. But here, it doesn't die off. People start looking more and more. So something happened in this like July of 2015 timeframe. The movie came out, but then people were still really interested in this line, "Luke, I am your father." And we're still before like Rebel 1 comes out. So I don't think it's, you should see another spike for Rebel 1. But this increase right here is people are searching kind of Mandela effect style things. So NASA, we have the professionals, we have, I made a mistake in my survey. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to go too much into that, but not only was it there, but we're on the opposite side of the galaxy than where we used to be. And this one, I guess I'm just floored that that means that 67.2% of the extremely confident professional astronomers taking this didn't get it right. Frankly, this result is pretty shocking. The majority of them thought 0 to 2 manned missions took place. So for professional astronomers, they don't think that we've been to the moon more than twice, or we even launched ships. we have Apollo 13. What were all the Apollo missions doing? There's just lots of weird questions on that one. Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. IMDb describes this Disney film as by far the most memorable full-length animated feature film that Disney's put out. There's stories about debunking Mandela effects, and they keep going back to this, and they'll say, look, the Brothers Grimm, in that version, it says mirror, mirror, but in the movie, they went with magic mirror. I mean, maybe you read the Brothers Grimm version, maybe once, maybe your mom read it to you, but like, people have watched that movie like 100,000 times compared to every once that they read that Brothers Grimm. So I don't think that that's evidence that that Brothers Grimm has sort of spoiled this as being a Mandela effect. It's just Brothers Grimm made it so everybody remembers something different. That Brothers Grimm influence to me is just so small compared to the impact that Disney had with this being one of like the top 10 movies of all time once it's adjusted for inflation. And then you get into the Google Trends and you can see, I guess there was a release or something. And again, nobody cared about a magic mirror on the wall. But somewhere down here, when you get into July of 2016, maybe this one took a little bit longer to go see. Maybe it's not quite as common, but sometime around July 2016, this difference between magic mirror on the wall and mirror mirror on the wall, that started taking off. So I would have expected this at July 2015, but I guess there's a little bit of a lag. Maybe there's no movie coming out, so maybe not quite as many people were watching this. I think this was like a re-release of the movie. And nobody cared about that line, Magic Mirror, when they re-released it. But then somehow it started creeping into collective consciousness that like, wow, this line has changed. So somewhere in July 2016, people started looking at this thing and getting confused. Interview with the Vampire. Again, Tom Cruise talks about it. He finds tons of actors, including Anne Rice and other people, just keep saying it. I guess we can go watch this Tom Cruise one. Look what I found.
I use the books as a reference for me, and you have to read them, especially Interview with the Vampire, because it's from Louis' point of view, especially Interview with the Vampire, especially Interview with the Vampire, especially Interview with the Vampire.
So there you go. Like the actors themselves all remember these lines when you go to like the Emmy Awards and they're doing interviews and like post-movie interviews, and just every single time Anne Rice and the actors are saying Interview with a Vampire. So I don't understand why the people that, were in that movie over like starring in that and talking about it all the time can't get it right when they're being interviewed about it. Now this data is kind of all screwy. It looks like we're just in the noise. My guess is that people stopped talking about Interview with a Vampire or Interview with the Vampire. Anne Rice hasn't come out with quite as much that I recall. So it sparked this whole goth thing, but then, you kind of have this, not enough people are interested. So this to me looks like a lot of noise. So it's tough to tell any kind of real data out of that. Then you get into Field of Dreams. So here's two different examples of why people remember Field of Dreams. When they said they will come, it was twofold in meaning. It meant the ball players would come, but most importantly, it meant the spectators would come and they would save the farm by paying for tickets. This is why he was willing to risk his crop space for the ball field, because he knew they would come and pay the ticket money. Now the plot makes less sense if he did it all just so he would come, because he would still lose his house. And, how do you look at your wife and say, look, I'm going to lose my house, but my dad will come back or something? I don't know. It's a common misconception. Everyone thinks it's they in reference to the baseball players on the crowds, but it's always been if you build it, he will come, because he is a reference to his father. Ray and his father had a falling out, and Ray was never able to reconcile before his father died, even though he would not know he was in the building the field for his father return. He realizes at the end of the movie, and he gets a chance at reconciliation and plays catch with his father one last time. The whole point of the movie isn't the other baseball players or the crowds, it's about his father. And that just feels totally weird to me. And there's actually a movie quote. So again, James Earl Jones is coming to our defense here. The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It has been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, it's a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us all that once was good, and that could be good again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come. See, he's got other characters in the film that are there to go say the line is really about people. It's not, he will come, Ray. He will definitely come. It's people will come. So there's other people, not just this one quote, but there's other people confirming that the line is really about the they coming. So this one just has a lot of evidence just within the movie itself that makes me think, wow, this is a real Mandela effect. And here I'm seeing that huge spike. It's not like they re-released this again, but people have caught on. It took them about a year, but sometime in July 2016, people have figured out, oh, this is a Mandela effect, and this is something that we should definitely be looking into. Okay, so then we get into universal donors. People had really deep stories about this. And me personally, I took a EMT course. It wasn't an EMT, it was wilderness first responder. So I know what goes into doing some of this medically trained stuff. And I just think that it's totally fascinating that basically with the exception of the people that are thinking it's AB, it's not quite, but it's kind of like a 50-50 split between O- and O positive. And it doesn't make any sense to me that these people, the medically trained and the medical professionals, wouldn't know the difference between these. And then there's actually, this whole thing is not really about some of the Toto effects, but I'm including some as kind of a teaser. Your heart is here, right? It's dead center in your body. So if you were to go feel for your heartbeat right now, it's right at your sternum, and you should be able to feel your heart there. But that's not where I remember it. I remember it like what you see for a lot of the art, that your heart is sort of on the left side of your heart. A lot of people would pledge allegiance with their hand over their left breast, kind of where a logo would be. That's where your heart used to be, but it's not anymore. If I were to go cut myself open, you would see that. And then also, this is a skull. This is apparently, it's not my skull, but this is what, human skulls look like now. What in God's name is this? This thing doesn't make any sense to me. What is this big divot that's there? This is just like the most extreme example of like a real Toto effect change. I used to have this beautiful, perfectly smooth skull that would go all the way from the left side to the right side. And now I have this like brand new gaping hole in the bone structure. That just weirds me out. How did I get into like a different body than the one I was in? Lots of things don't make sense anymore. Nelson Mandela, and most of what I want is this, chaos erupted afterwards. So here's the book, English Alive. There's one example of a book that says Nelson Mandela died on the 23rd of July in 1991. And what is it? The chaos that erupted in the ranks. I couldn't find the whole book, or all the quotes, or even look at all of page 54 to go see what was on here. But English Alive, I've never heard of this thing. Nobody's ever heard of this thing. Western Cape Branch of South African Council for English Education. This is like some crazy, like 8 people in the world have ever read this thing. But here in this book, there's this example of he died. So, again, it always goes back to, is this book the reason why everybody thinks that he died? Well, this is from like some totally strange book. So why would nobody has read this thing. No American has read this book. So there's no reason why 15% of America would think just because this one strange like record keeping of the South African Council for English Education, like their notes that everybody thinks, oh, he died. That doesn't make any sense. So this, to me, it makes more sense that this is some kind of reality residue, that, somebody kept track of the fact that he died and not everything changed. Not everything changed. I personally knew that he didn't die in prison because of a Chris Rock skit where he says, oh, Nelson Mandela spent 30 years in prison, he could handle it, but he spent 6 months married and he's like, get me out of here. So that's the reason why I knew for sure that he died in prison. But I also had this weird memory of like 4th or 5th grade for me, which puts it at just a little bit before. So maybe it was later. Maybe I just have my years wrong. But I remember knowing that he died. It's not like I'm a really strong memory and I don't have a lot of details, but I do remember hearing from my teacher that Nelson Mandela died. And then I just get into timing. So this is the Mandela effect. So, it's impossible to know this is July 2016. It seems to be having kind of a spike, and maybe we've lulled, but it looks like it's coming back up. But people are talking about the Mandela effect. Nobody cared about this. The term was coined sometime in like 2010. Nobody's talking about this up until like 2015, 2016. So there's like a handful of people on the internet, those that are like somehow awake earlier, or they got here earlier, or they transferred earlier or something. I don't really know, but it doesn't look like it's one continuous event or it just only happened once. Maybe some people got here earlier, and so a couple people talked about it, but then somewhere around July 2015 is when we really had this like big moment and everybody appeared. And then you have your Google Trends. So now I'm comparing Berenstein, Mandela Effect, Luke, I Am Your Father, Mirror, Mirror, and Sex in the City. And, Sex in the City, people were looking. I showed you that people were looking. Sex in the City was really popular. So at some of these time periods, people are looking for it. And this is sort of like a really popular search. None of these are all that popular. But then suddenly, Mandela Effect is actually getting up there. Berenstein Bears is sort of getting up there. This kid's book is now almost as popular as one of the most massively produced television shows in TV history. And Mandela Effect is now sort of as popular as people searching for Sex in the City, which is not as popular as people searching for Sex and the City, but it's just showing me what I'm really taking away from this is that not a lot of people cared back in 2012, but maybe a couple, like nobody cared prior to 2012. Sometime around November or possibly December of 2012, people started caring. So maybe that Mayan calendar ending was actually like we all merged to a new universe. Who would have expected that? And then sometime in like July of 2015, you see a spike. And as it goes into July of 2016, now it's sort of gotten caught in a hole. Then people are actually looking at this and searching for this. So, it seems like there's some data that's out there that suggests this. Again, I talk about in the paper, look at the spike. That doesn't make any sense to me. But now people are actually looking. They're not looking for No, I Am Your Father, but they are looking for this line, Luke, I Am Your Father, after that bump. And you don't see that bump in any of these. So this is another piece of evidence to me that something happened in July 2015. And as that time period goes on, you can sort of see that there's this slope here. More and more people are looking for this. Yeah, they were looking for this because maybe some of these people are just erroneously typing in the wrong thing, or everybody thinks it's Luke, I Am Your Father, so they're searching. But these people that are coming after it, these are the people that are looking for Luke, I Am Your Father, not because the movie came out, but because they're like, what the hell? When did this line change? And it's just now really starting to take hold. And actually, all of that is again evidence that this is like a new phenomena, that we have not spent, the last 40 years with all this Mandela effect stuff going on. But most people have not experienced the Mandela effect, from what I can see in the Google Trends data, until like July 2015. It seems like, yes, there were some at that like November, December 2012, and then there's a handful, like 5% of the people that might have experienced this well before that. But the vast majority of people that are now getting their head wrapped around what the hell is this Mandela effect thing, it didn't happen until July of 2015. And then finally, I start getting into a question of what is this effect? What is it showing you? What does it mean? And I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how we got here. The one thing that stands out is that we're on a different part of the galaxy. So maybe that gives us some evidence. But so was it time travel? Was it CERN? Was it a D-wave? This is a quantum computer. Are we jumping around dimensions? Are there merging timelines? Are we in some kind of virtual reality thing like a holodeck or the Matrix? Is this the end times? Are we experiencing reincarnation? There's a spirituality book that a lot of people references. It's called Law of One series. And in the Law of One series, they talk about harvesting souls at the end of the Mayan calendar. Maybe the people here are the ones that had their soul harvested. I don't know. Maybe there's 2 Urs or 3 Urs. Like this. The main thing to me is that this world is infinitely more complicated than what we thought it was. I don't actually know what the answer is, but I know that the answer is not like, oh, my memory just failed me. It's something else is taking effect here, and that's what some of those controls are showing me. And actually, there's this idea that we've ascended, kind of like this harvesting, but without the harvest. We're going from a 3D experience to a 4D or 5D or higher. And then there's multiple things. So I don't know what the answer is of why. I'm very well convinced that it's not just a memory thing. And that as we look into, when you start getting into more Toto effects, like I can understand why somebody would say it's just memory on Mandela effects. But when you start getting into Toto effects, when your like skull is different, when your heart is different, when the geography is different, when how many people are in the car with JFK is different, when you have just total, like all the products in the store are different. Like when you just realize how many things around you, when you put them all adjacent to each other, like it's way less common that people say, oh, it's just memory. Now everybody's like, oh crap, something's going on here. I don't know what, like, again, when I start polling people, they don't have clear answers of what is going on, but they recognize something's going on. And so that's where I can leave you. I mean, we're at the very beginning of looking at this. This is not even, there's no, like, I can't even find a journal to go publish something like this in. And, it's not like Vice is going to go run an 83-page story. So I'm counting on you guys to sort of share this, and I'm hoping if I have one ask, you guys have watched an hour and 35 minutes of this. Thank you. If I have one ask, it goes back to the beginning. Please send people to these quizzes. I want more data. I want to make sure if I get up to like 50,000 or 100,000 people on this quiz, I'm going to feel even better that I'm not just getting like small pockets of people, but that it's really representative of everybody, maybe not even just Americans, but people all over the world. There's a second quiz. This one's pretty quick. And that third one now has not all, but the vast majority of the Mandela effects, the vast majority of the Toto effects. And so if I have one ask, it's please go take some of these quizzes. Maybe you'll screw off my results because you'll put some of these funky ones in now that you've heard about some of them. But I'm still very interested in having you share some of your own individual recollections about these, and just share it like somebody that doesn't know the answers already, just what you experienced beforehand, and that would be pretty good for me. So this has been very long, but hopefully it's been informative, and hopefully it was faster to go do this at an hour and a half than it was to go read 83 pages. So I know it was long, but there's a lot there. And I'd also encourage you to go back to the testimonials and some of the links that are in here. Go watch them. They're all pretty cool. This is the best I can do right now. And I'm not part of a university. I'm not part of a team. I'm just one dude kind of checking this stuff out and looking at other YouTubers and seeing what's out there. Please spread this. Please share those quizzes, and let's see if we can't figure out what's actually causing this and how we got here. Thanks, guys. Bye.